Hey, good evening, afternoon, morning, whatever time it is for you. GleeCon here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. On the last episode, we continued our playthrough of World of Warcraft Classic by messing around with a gnomish mage as she did the Karanos quests. It's the second time we've done those. The other set was off camera with our hunter, and we'll alternate the hunter back in on the next visit to Karanos. And that will be in a few episodes because we will continue with the Tauren questline next time. We've also been exploring the classic zones and beyond from a Dungeons and Dragons perspective, as the writers have given some tidbits and some ideas to the people working to craft the source material. And they made another book called Lands of Mystery in the voice of Bran Bronzebeard, and it's went through all of Kalimdor. We also did a lot of the areas in the South Seas, and now we've talked about Northrend, which is going to be our final continent in this book, but it has a big chunk of zones. So stay a while and listen as we really get into the Northrend zones with Azjol-Nerub. Notice that's not an actual zone. This is a dungeon, but at this stage in the conception of what Northrend will look like, still 2 or 3 years out from the 2.5 years or so away from the drop of when Wrath of the Lich King will come out. Azjol-Nerub is really something that exists, yes, as a place within the Dragonblight, but also as a pretty sizable realm within World of Warcraft, or within Warcraft 3. So I think that's where that's what's informing their decision to treat this as an entire zone. So Azjol-Nerub has a population of 20,000, mostly Scourge, surprisingly, 82%, as opposed to Nerubian. They're set apart, and there are little dwarves poking around there. And actually, if you remember from Warcraft 3, there were some dwarves in those tunnels. I wish I'd seen this place 20 years ago. Back then, the Nerubian civilization was still alive and strong. Azjol-Nerub was their kingdom, and the Spider-Men controlled all its tunnels. From what I have seen, it must have been amazing. Their culture is almost as old as our own, and every bit is attuned to life underground. The biggest difference, I'd say, is that the Nerubians focus more on the cerebral and less on the physical. Their society had more scholars and artists, and fewer smiths and miners. That was all before the Lich King, of course. He saw immediately that the Nerubians posed a major threat. None of the other races on Northrend had their numbers, their organization, or their discipline. True, the Nerubians rarely ventured above ground, but he couldn't take that chance. In his place, I'd have either walled up every entrance to Azjol-Nerub or swarmed the underground kingdom and wiped it clean. He chose the latter. They call it the War of the Spider. Pause here. War of the Spider is an in-game book. We talked about the in-game books as we found our first one in Classic last time. We will be reading both the Wowpedia article on War of the Spider and the in-game book in this side lore series in the future. It was long and hard, and the Nerubians almost won. They may prefer thought and art, but they're fearsome foes when roused. Unfortunately, the Scourge has an endless supply of warriors, and every dead Nerubian potentially added to its ranks. In the end, the Scourge's numbers prevailed, and the implacable undead swept through Azjol-Nerub, and he emptied its tunnels of defenders. The Lich King conquered, and the Nerubian civilization all but died. Now most of Azjol-Nerub lies in ruins. It's still a fascinating place, and many of its murals and frescoes and columns stand intact. The Scourge doesn't care about riches, material or scholarly, and rich tapestries still hang on the walls, while impressive tomes line bookcases. I could spend months roaming the tunnels and still never see all of this great kingdom. But I wish I could have seen it then. People and culture. There aren't many people left in Azjol-Nerub, not many living ones anyway. The place is overrun with Scourge creatures, of course, and the undead stalk up and down the corridors and through the tunnels, carrying and hammering and digging. It's best to stay out of their way if possible. Some Scourge creatures walk right by you, oblivious, completely focused on their current task, but others drop everything in order to convert you, meaning kill you and reanimate you as one of them. You can't tell beforehand which approach a creature will take, so you're better off ducking when you see them coming. The Nerubians haven't completely abandoned their kingdom. I saw several Nerubians here and there during my wanderings and even talked to a few of them, particularly once I met up with Baelgun and his crew. Most of the Nerubians died in the War of the Spider, though, and few remained. The survivors are scattered throughout the tunnels, hiding alone or in small groups, destroying Scourge creatures whenever possible, but keeping hidden at all costs. Others form larger bands and plot rebellion, but there's only so much you can do when you're outnumbered hundreds to one. Doesn't help that the Azjol-Nerub's ruler is a former Nerubian himself, a crypt lord who was once the Nerubian king. That's the guy from Warcraft 3. What I've seen of the Nerubians is a nervous, almost paranoid people given to rage, grief, and violence, but I'm sure that's a response to their plight. Belgen tells me they were polished, courtly scholars and artisans once and rarely raised a voice or a talon in anger. Oh, that's an interesting take on who they are. I haven't seen many fallen races. It's fascinating from a scientific standpoint, examining how the Nerubians have changed their outlook, their activities, and even their appearance based upon events. It's also heartbreaking and more than a little terrifying to see these once proud creatures reduced to scrounging for food and digging through ruins for broken tools and anything else they can use. Let's read about Belgen Flamebeard very quick. He's a scout warrior, an Ironforged dwarf hiding in there. This dwarf is short and stocky even for one of his race. His flame-red beard looks like it would brush the top of his boots when loose, though a double braid hangs only to his knees. He scowls beneath his thick red eyebrows, and his battered nose is all but lost between brow and beard. In battle, Belgen is a fierce and wily opponent, leaping into the fray and swinging from side to side, deliberately using his braids to distract opponents from his whirling hammer. Belgen is smart enough to retreat when the odds turn against him, and he is not above attacking from behind, although with his bulk and coloring he is not built for stealth. Since Muradin Bronzebeard's death, Belgen is the leader of the Bronzebeard expedition. He and the other survivors are camped near the entrance to Azjol-Nerub and guard it to ensure nothing escapes from within. They keep coming back and hitting Muradin's death. So either they haven't decided to reveal he's been alive, and they're keeping that under wraps with just one more kind of fake out after another, or they literally haven't decided to make that change in the narrative yet. Belgen Flamebeard leads the Ironforged dwarves here, the remnants of Muradin's party. He's a good fellow, though a bit intense, and the dwarves made me welcome when I arrived. In fact, since they've stalked out an area right by the main entrance to the kingdom, my fellow dwarves were the first people I saw upon my descent. For a moment I thought the entire kingdom might be filled with our kind. That was a pleasant fantasy, even if it only lasted a moment. Belgen's got few dwarves with him, good hardy souls, but they're no match for the Scourge. I doubt they could even stop the Nerubians, particularly the larger rebel bands. Fortunately, the Nerubians are cordial. We hate the Scourge almost as much as they do, and we have a lot in common with them. Under other circumstances, our two races could have become strong allies. As it is, the Nerubians leave Belgen's crew alone and sometimes stop by to exchange information or trade found items for food. Belgen keeps his men hidden from the Scourge, but they watch the doors constantly. He's told me a little about what lies deep beneath the earth here, and I completely understand his vow to stop such evils from escaping to the surface. The only other residents of Azjol-Nerub are monsters, most mysterious creatures called faceless ones. I've seen one or two, heard a few others, and been told about several more. They are humanoid, and their heads look like insectile octopi. There we go, because the old ones are here in force. One arm is much larger than the other, grotesque and misshapen. Tales say they lived here long before the Scourge came, dwelling too deep for the Nerubians to hunt them. It's these horrors Belgen has vowed to stop, and I wish him luck. I'd say we should send him more men if I thought it would help, and that's because the faceless ones, the old ones' minions, have already reared their head in Warcraft 3. Geography. Azjol-Nerub is entirely underground. It's a fascinating place and stretches for miles. I wouldn't be surprised if it lies beneath most or all of Northrend. The rock here is predominantly granite, mixed with some igneous stone where volcanoes once rose and where magma from deep beneath bubbled up long ago. The Nerubians were thorough artisans and left nary a corner untouched. Every edge is smooth and faceted, every corridor planed and polished. They preserved the odd angles created by nature, but straightened and widened tunnels into corridors and vaulted ceilings. Our people could learn something from their techniques, I think. Little lives down here, especially now. Various lichen and fungi grow in corners and along the walls. The Nerubians evidently nurtured certain phosphorescent and luminescent varieties to provide light, and these have since grown unchecked. Bats perch on door frames and columns, as do spiders of varying size. Underground lakes teem with blind, silvery white fish, and insects and worms crawl through the soft dirt alongside. Monsters prowl the deeper caves, and the less said about these, the better. Do not approach them unless heavily armed and surrounded by friends. Azjol-Nerub can be divided into two sections, the Old Kingdom and the Upper Kingdom. The Old Kingdom, that's one of the instances, This area is deep below the surface and is the original location of Azjol-Nerub. The Nerubians preferred to stay well below the surface level. This area has not been well maintained because the Scourge never descended this far. By the same token, that means they have not looted as much here, and it's also easier to avoid them by staying to these lower levels. Most of the Nerubian rebels live down here. The Upper Kingdom. Maybe that's, whatever, Ankahet. Or maybe Ankahet's the Old Kingdom. Ankahet : the Old Kingdom. I can't remember. This area includes more recent structures built when the Nerubians grew too numerous to stay below. The War of the Spider was fought through here, so much of this area is destroyed. The Scourge now occupies this level. They've reopened damaged passages and cleared rubble-filled tunnels, but they did not bother to repair the many statues, friezes, and murals that were ruined. Sites and settlements. Azjol-Nerub has no separate settlements. Once it was a single unified kingdom. Now it is a shadow of its former self controlled by the Scourge, except where pockets of Nerubian resistance lurk, or where the dwarves hunker down, or where even darker creatures roam unopposed. I should mention that Azjol-Nerub is not a safe place for several reasons. First, of course, the Scourge controls it. Second, creatures live below, including the strange faceless ones, ancient monsters long imprisoned beneath the ice and recently loosed again. Yet even uninhabited, this kingdom would be dangerous. The Nerubians set all manner of traps here, including circular doors that must be moved just so, to avoid them crashing down on you, statues that release streams of frost down on you. Streams of frost and intruders in pits hidden beneath seemingly normal floor tiles. I suspect many adventurers have ventured into this place hoping for gold and other treasures and found death instead. Doorward. This is the area Belgen selects for his camp. He and the other dwarfs fortify it heavily. They also have several barrels of explosive placed around the camp, which I pointed out was not the safest idea in the world. Belgen has a fine view of the tunnel leading up to the surface. Behind him is the massive blood-red door leading down to the depths of the Old Kingdom. The door is locked and Belgen holds the blood key that opens it. I wonder if Belgen's dwarves exist in that little pre-tunnel that leads into these instances in Dragonblight. History. Azjol-Nerub was the center of Nerubian civilization. I don't know if the Nerubians began here, but certainly most, if not their entire race, dwelled here. They left the rest of the world in peace and pursued their interests beneath the ground. Then the Lich King attacked. He defeated them, killing most of the Nerubians in the process and converting many of the survivors into crypt fiends and other undead. Those who could fled his touch. This looks like one of the Belgen's dwarves. If not, maybe Bran, running from possibly a crypt lord, but maybe it's the main guy himself. Anubarak or whatever. 2 years ago, Arthas and the mighty Anubarak traveled through this area on their way to the Frozen Throne. Adventures. Azjol-Nerub is a mystery waiting to be explored. It once held powerful and advanced civilization, and many of its treasures still rest here undamaged. Great riches litter the lower halls, not only gems and magic items, but art and literature and scholarly tomes. The Scourge infest this place. Forgotten ones seethe below, eager to return to the world above. And the quest is no longer forgotten. Belgen thought the blood-red door behind him was the only way out of the Old Kingdom. Now a second passage has been discovered. The Scourge prepares to enter the tunnel and explore the region below. Belgen knows the Faceless Ones will overpower even the undead and then be free to escape into Northrend proper, and so must stop them. Yet he cannot leave the first door unattended. The PCs must follow the new passage in his stead, making sure no one releases the horrors below. I feel like this would be a high-level questline. But I guess Belgen can hold him off, and he's only level 10, so not that high. Okay, everyone. We got another episode in the pipe, 5x5. As always, you know I appreciate you. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time on Lore of Warcraft.